I can speak for Russia. China I don't know as well, but Russia, I grew up in Russia, in the Soviet Union, so I can speak about that. Russia has a very strong tradition in hard sciences in general, especially theoretical sciences on a kind of theoretical side of the spectrum, namely mathematics, and now more and more computer science. There is a political reason, historical reason, because during the Soviet times of the Soviet Union, times of socialism, career in humanities or in business was not available to young people. You see, so all the subjects such as philosophy or history or anything really, economics, were controlled and dominated by the Marxist doctrine and Marxism-Leninism, and so you couldn't really have any freedom in pursuing those subjects. And private business was non-existent, no private property and so on. So that pushed a lot of talented youth towards sciences. Now, in sciences, equipment was very poor, so experimental science was kind of out. Also, some important branches of science, such as genetics, were persecuted. Computer science also a little bit, but the government was stimulating all the subjects which were related to defense. So nuclear physics for sure, atomic physics, relate to the bomb. Mathematics was needed for that, so they were supporting fundamental research in mathematics, in theoretical physics, and also in computer science. Even though the computers, when I was a student in the 80s in the Soviet Union, we still had computers we had were replicas of IBM machines from the 60s, from 20 years earlier, which I imagine maybe there was design was stolen perhaps, or some kind of espionage, I don't know what, but there's these huge machines when there were already laptops, there were already personal computers, not laptops, but personal computers in the United States. So it was lagging behind. Now, of course, it doesn't lag behind anymore because of the global connections. But so I would say that one of the answers is a tradition in computer science. There are very strong computer scientists in the strong school. In a lot of people come from that tradition, but it doesn't still. And I think in China probably similar. In fact, you constantly hear the stories about Russian hackers, Chinese hackers, and this and that. So I think there is this tradition. And people who have these ideas of transhumanism, strong artificial intelligence, singularity, and so on, they usually come from that field. They come from the field of computer science, because for the reasons we have discussed, it's natural, it's very human. Even though they deny their own humanity, what they're doing is actually very human, because they get so excited about the stuff they learn, and then they start believing that that's all there is. You see, so that's one of the reasons. So, in other words, people in other professions, in other sciences, if you look at biologists, for example, they'll be much less likely to subscribe to these ideas, right? But for mathematicians and computer scientists, that's quite common. It still doesn't explain why so many of these brilliant, bright people, and I think Kurzweil, for example, I think is a brilliant man. He's really very bright, very, very smart. And so is Demis Hassabis, that I mentioned earlier. But it still doesn't answer the question why they have these blind spots, in my view. Why there are these sort of glaring omissions in their worldview. So they conveniently avoid speaking about Gödel's incompleteness, about quantum mechanics, about advances in neuroscience and psychology, which show clearly and unambiguously how much more sophisticated the workings of the human mind are than what they are leading us to believe. So why there is this blind spot? And I think this is really the heart of the issue. And it's global. It's a global phenomenon because it is about humanity. It's not about a specific country or society. And it is about knowing who we are. It's about knowing what it means to be human. And I'm sorry to say, but I think that trying to build these machines on which to upload ourselves is a way to escape from ourselves. It's one's way to escape from oneself, to escape from one's pain. And that is something which I don't say lightly, because it is something which I have discovered about myself, and I feel that it's a universal sort of it's a universal mechanism, which is in this era of computers and social networks and so on, is taken a very particularly troubling form, that escapism from reality by means of denying one's own humanity. So that's what I think is what is uniting these people from different countries that you mentioned, through no fault of their own, in some sense. I mean, we are all, it is very human. It is very human to want to escape pain. But we've talked about this earlier. You've got Dmitry Itzkov, who is one of the extreme cases, proponent of this Avatar project, Initiative 2045, where he is perhaps going further than others in terms of already constructing, not just talking about it, but constructing sort of avatars, sort of the shell, which he believes he will take when he's uploaded to this cloud, to this network. First of all, this already shows a complete ignorance of what the human body really is. The human body is not static. It's constantly moving. It's constantly rejuvenating itself. The cells are constantly dying and being reborn. It's like a whirlwind in a pool. It's not something you can grab and make a copy of. It is a complete misunderstanding of this idea. So he suddenly is making this thing. Here is my body. But what struck me when I investigated this, and I have spoken about it, as you know, what really struck me is the facial features of this avatar, which he has created in his own likeness. Yeah. It's very, very sad. It's the saddest robot you'll ever see. And it's paradoxical, because on the one hand, he wants to seduce everybody with these ideas and attract funding and support. And then he presents this human-sized robot, which kind of looks like him. He looks super depressed. And that is almost like, that here is a testimony to the unconscious, to the power of the unconscious. So on the surface of it, he is this very enthusiastic guy about Avatar Project Sun, but he cannot suppress his unconscious, which expresses itself in the way it looks. And it's very telling. So even if he makes this, he cannot pretend. In the end, you cannot pretend. All this, you cannot run away from yourself. You cannot run away from yourself. And that's the catch, that's catch 22. Because the point is, each of us, Dmitry Itzkov and Hermann Weyl and so on, and I love these people. I think they're really wonderful, good people, fundamentally good people. They're not trying to do anything evil or anything like this. They have to come to terms with these issues. They have to come to terms with their inner world, as it were. And nobody can force them. So I have gone through this process. I have worked on myself, and I was able to see things which I hadn't been able to see not that long ago. So it's very powerful, and I see people around me, some who do this work and some who don't. I know that I cannot force anybody. Nobody can force. It's like in another film of Kubrick, Clockwork Orange. They used to put Alex and open his eyes and force him to watch these films. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. You have to do it yourself. And you will do, and they will do it when they're ready for it. When they're ready for it. But so for me, it's not to try to convince them that they should work on this. It's like I cannot tie, Dmitry Itskov to a chair and make him remember his childhood and perhaps find out about what really happened and find out about his traumas, which are guiding him in these endeavors. Which again, by the way, nothing wrong with it. It's human. It's perfectly human. So I know I cannot do that. What can I do? I can share my experience, which I do, as you know, in my public speeches and interviews. But also, I think it's my duty to expose that to other people who are being fooled, frankly, by these experts, the self-appointed experts and prophets of singularity and transhumanism. Because people are not aware. Part of it has to do with our terrible math education and science education in general, but especially math education. People are afraid of mathematics, they're afraid of computer science, they're afraid of coding. And the flip side of that is that then they start worshiping it. They are ascribing the supernatural powers to mathematics and to mathematicians. So when they hear somebody like Kurzweil, who is clearly a distinguished engineer and scientist and inventor, or Demis Hassabis, people tend to believe that simply because of their authority in those matters. Well, now I'm a mathematician, and my job is to explain that the reason why they're selling us these stories, is not their expertise in science, computer science, and mathematics. In fact, they are going against that expertise. They are bluntly incapable of seeing obvious things which contradict their theories, right? So what's driving them, in fact, is their humanity, is their psychology, is their unconscious, whatever you want to call it. And I think that this is what we today have to realize very, very clearly, because the technology is intruding on us. I mean, I was just reading this article. 3/4 of young people under 25, 3/4 of young people under 25 say that the first thing they do when they wake up is they reach out for their smartphone. Although 61% say that they believe they use their smartphones less than other people. So, of course, I'm not doing it, but then I'm doing it, right? So, technology is invading our lives. And it becomes, so then when I say, why, Professor, are you saying that life is not an algorithm? Because my life now starts looking like an algorithm, because I'm constantly doing this. I am becoming an extension of my iPhone, not the other way around, you see. So that's why I think it's very important to see the fallacies of this idea, the fallacy of these ideas. But to see that, it's also important to see the source. Why somebody like Kurzweil, somebody like Itskov, and so on, why are they so enamored with this idea? Where does it come from? What is the source? And I think when people will see it, they will pause and they say, it's not that they know something I don't know. They don't know something about themselves, which makes them propagate these ideas and push it on us. We will not allow this.